gentlemen, my name is Dele Alimi. I'm the Director General CEO of the Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria, on behalf of the Governing Council of the Institute. I welcome you to this collaborative program, webinar organized jointly by the Reporting Council of Nigeria and the Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria. This is one of the many areas of collaboration between the Institute and the Financial Reporting Council. I want to use this opportunity to also continue to thank the Financial Reporting Council for the opportunity to work with them and to continue to deepen the best practices. Today, we are examining exposure draft of 2 governance codes that the Financial is about to release. The first one is the governance code for and the second is the governance code for the corporate sector in Nigeria. You will agree with me that it's something we should have done long before now. But again, they say the next best time is now. We want to congratulate the Financial Reporting Council on this feat, and we are hopeful that on the release of this, we are going to see a new vista of value and opportunity for corporate governance in Nigeria. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome. My job here is simple because we have some very experienced experts who will be dissecting these codes. And of course, we will also have opportunity of raising our views and comments about the code. The hierarchy of the Financial Reporting Council is here to listen to us and to take what you as professionals bring. So without to just do a few introductions, I will leave the other introductions to the moderator of the sessions that we're going to have within this program. I would just like to do what I'll call an introduction of the special guest. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you all Chief Host, President and Chairman of the Governing Council of the Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria, Alhaji Tijani Bolodo. Mr. President, you're welcome.
Thank you,
President,
DG.
of course, is a fellow of the Chartered Institute. Thank you, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, everybody.
Yes, morning. An eminent Nigerian who some years was in charge of the committee that came up with the code, with the 2018 Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. It's my pleasure to introduce to you all Alhaji M.K. Amat. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, and it's an honor and privilege to be here. And thank you, Mr. President, and the Executive Secretary of the Financial Reporting Council for organizing this event. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, sir. You're very welcome. We recognize and appreciate your contribution to the corporate governance stance in Nigeria. We really appreciate you. Without wasting much of your time, I was hopeful that I would be able to introduce the Executive Secretary of the Financial Reporting Council. I'm just checking the list to see if he's here with us now. But of course, let me introduce one of the Executive Director of the Financial Reporting Council who has joined us, Mr. Titus Osawe. Mr. Osawe, you're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, DG. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, I'll do other introductions as our special guest come in. It's my pleasure now to invite President and Chairman of Governing Council of the Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria, Alhaji Tijani M. Borodo, LLM, to give his welcome remark. Mr. President, sir.
Thank you, DG. Well, where do I start? Good morning, distinguished guests of honor, the Executive Secretary and CEO of Financial Reporting Council, Dr. Rabi Olo, FCA, AM, CIoD, Barrister Aladi Kifasi, Chairman, Public Sector Governance Code Technical Working Group, Dr. Joe Abba, Chairman, Non-for-Profit Governance Code Technical Working Committee, our esteemed keynote speakers, my brother MK Ahmed, OON, MCIOD, Deputy Chairman, Public Sector Governance Code Technical Working Group. And of course, he was the person that midwifed the Private Sector Code 2018 and happened to have been part of his own team. My sister, Ms. Ayotola Jagun, FCIOD, Deputy Chairman, Non-for-Profit Governance Code Technical Working Committee. Our valued panelists and moderators, members of the Governing Council and Executive Committee of the Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria, fellows and members of the Institute, our valued guests and associates, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Governing Council of the Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria and our partner, the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, I warmly welcome you all to this pivotal webinar on the exposure drafts of corporate governance codes for the public sector and non-for-profit sector, jointly organized by the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria and the Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guests, keynote speakers, panelists, and moderators as we embark on this important journey towards enhancing corporate governance in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, the corporate governance landscape is rapidly evolving and changing, and staying updated with emerging standards is crucial for organizations dedicated to maintaining transparency, accountability, and sustainable practices. The release of these exposure drafts signifies a significant step forward in our collective mission to redefine and improve governance frameworks for the public sector and non-for-profit organizations. Your participation today underscores your commitment to uphold the highest standards of good governance. Distinguished participants, the Financial Reporting Council has been our long-standing partner in progress, and today's event strengthens that relationship, which is targeted at achieving the mutually beneficial goals of deepening good governance practices in Nigeria. This webinar is designed to provide a comprehensive exploration of the Nigerian Public Sector Governance Code and the Non-for-Profit Governance Code through insightful presentations, comparative analysis, and interactive discussions. We aim to enhance our understanding of the proposed codes and their implications. This platform also offers an invaluable opportunity for you to clarify any ambiguous aspects of the drafts and contribute your perspective and expertise to the finalization of these codes. Today, we seek to analyze the key provisions of the exposure drafts, propose revisions, discuss the rationale behind such revisions, evaluate their potential impact, and facilitate interactive discussions to elicit your valuable inputs. By doing so, we hope to ensure that the final codes not only meet the governance needs of all stakeholders, but also uphold the principles of quality and standard. I extend my sincere gratitude to our distinguished speakers, panelists, and moderators, whose expertise and insight will guide us through the nuances of the exposure drafts. Your contributions are instrumental in shaping the future of corporate governance practices in Nigeria. Our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to profoundly thank the Executive Secretary and Chief Executive of the Financial Reporting Council, Dr. Rabi Olowo, AM CIoD, and the DG CIoD Nigeria, Mr. Dele Alimi, Chief Dele Alimi, and CIoD, and their teams for the continued synergy in ensuring the success of this webinar. I must commend the two teams. Permit me to seize this opportunity to invite you all to attend another landmark program, that is the 2024 National Corporate Governance Summit, being organized by the Institute of Directors Center for Corporate Governance, that's IODCCG, slated for next week, 25th and 26th July. This summit is physical and in Abuja, in Lagos. This summit is another product of our enduring partnership between the critical stakeholders, particularly the Financial Reporting Council. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize the importance of our active participation. The success of this webinar depends on the quality of our dialogue and the depth of our engagement. Together, we can drive a positive change and foster a culture of excellence in corporate governance. Before I thank you finally, may I digress a little? Last year, in September, during my investiture as the president, our esteemed fellow, our esteemed elder, our esteemed corporate gurus, Chief Oshinkoye, challenged me as the president to see that the public sector code and non-for-profit comes into fruition within my 2 years tenure. Ladies and gentlemen, we have worked assiduously towards achieving this, not because of the challenge, but because of the belief we have that apart from the private sector, the public and non-for-profit need these codes, and it's in the interest of governance, good corporate governance, and the Nigerian economy. So perhaps I can say proudly, by the special grace of God, before the end of my tenure, in the next 11 months or so, this course will come into reality. And Chief Oshinkoye would be very proud prophecy for this code. Finally, I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to our fruitful discussions. Thank you very much. Have a nice deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. And let me also remind participants here that this will be collaborating with Financial Reporting Council on the codes. I remember immediately after the release of the 2018 Corporate Governance Code, we also had a stakeholders forum. Then, of course, it was a physical event at a hotel where all stakeholders were able to judge the Financial Reporting Council. I believe it was really worth our while. This time around, we have taken it a mite further by discussing the draft version of those codes. Thank you very much for being here. So just before the moderator for the first session, I want to introduce you, guests of honor, the two guests.
Is it from my side, please, colleagues?
No, I think the DG's session.
No, yes, it's not from your side. I think it's yes, his network is frozen.
Thank you. Okay.
I think that this is frozen, isn't it? Or is it his network that's frozen?
Yeah, I think I was even thrown. I was thrown completely out, but I'm back. Everyone hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can everyone hear? Thank
Yes,
you very much. So I was just welcoming Barrister Kifasi. You're welcome very much, sir. You're welcome. Thank you. And I also want to introduce the chairman of the not-for-profit sector. Dr. Haba, thank you for being here and for good work for our nation. So listen, session. My pleasure to introduce to you all who will be taking over me. This is Chairman Mori.
Okay, thank you so much, Deji. Your network is pretty unstable. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, distinguished speakers. Permit me to stand on all existing protocol that have been established. My role here this morning is to moderate the session around the public sector code. And I would like to, I see that the chairman of the technical working group is online. Sir, would you want to give your goodwill message, or do we proceed to the keynotes address? You are muted. You are muted, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir, and welcome.
Yeah, I saw your program that I was supposed to give a goodwill message.
Absolutely, sir.
I will be giving one small statement in support.
The floor is yours, sir. Please proceed.
Okay, fine. Very good. Okay, good morning, everyone. Permit me also to stand on the protocol already established. I want to express the fact that I'm highly delighted to be here with you today. As we are all aware, an exposure draft is meant to solicit public comments on a document. In this case, the draft Public Sector Governance Code. We expect the Chartered Institute of Directors to express her opinion with a view to improving the document before it becomes a valid code for implementation. In an era where transparency, accountability, and effective management are paramount, the governance of public sector entities holds immense significance. The code serves as a guiding framework, outlining principles and best practices for the governance of public sector organizations. Its primary objective is to ensure that these entities operate with integrity, efficiency, and in the public interest. The code has been divided into two parts. Part one covers preliminary matters, and part two constitutes the core of the code. At its core, the code emphasizes principles such as transparency, accountability, and ethical behavior, including the principles of public life. By adhering to these principles, public sector organizations can foster trust among stakeholders, promote responsible decision-making, and ultimately enhance the delivery of public services by public sector institutions. Furthermore, the code recognizes the diverse nature of public sector entities and provides flexibility to accommodate their unique needs and circumstances. Whether it is a ministry, department, agency, or a public corporation, the principles outlined in the code can be tailored to suit various contexts while upholding the overarching values of good governance. We are indeed confident that the document will positively impact on Nigerian public sector. As we are all aware, FRC is responsible for issuing codes for good governance in Nigeria. I am equally aware that Chartered Institute of Directors takes corporate governance very seriously by exploring current issues in corporate governance and stewardship, all for the benefit of business community and citizens of our country. It is my belief that the Institute will do justice today to the exposure draft, all for the benefit of our community and citizens. The Institute is a very important stakeholder with its mandate transcending private sector organizations, public sector enterprises, and not-for-profit organizations. This is the reason we're here today to cover the two sectors. I will conclude by appreciating the Chartered Institute of Directors for taking their very important role by giving us corporate responsibility by organizing this very important meeting. You are not paid for it, but you have a responsibility to our mission. We appreciate you. May I also specifically appreciate the Executive Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Reporting Council, Dr. Rabi Olu, who steered the ship of this committee to the level that we are currently discussing the exposure draft that will eventually be finalized into a public document that will help drive our economy to the future. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope I have not taken too much time that should be used on the technical paper itself. But I believe that my contribution is to encourage you to continue doing this job that we may not, as citizens, appreciate the Institute very well. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, our guest of honor, the chairman, the Public Sector Governance Code Technical Working Committee, and the former head of service, Barrister Danladi Kifasi. Thank you so much for your goodwill message. Without further ado, I think we'll now move to the keynote address by our keynote speaker, Mr. M.K. Ahmad, Mohammed K. Ahmad, OON. He's a deputy chairman of the Public Sector Governance Code Technical Working Group Committee, and also he has a 35 years experience leading and working in various public sector organizations and financial services institutions in Nigeria. The CEO of the Chartered Institute of Directors said, he also was the chairman of the technical committee that established or revamped the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018. So if you're ready, I'll pass the mic to you so that you can give your keynote remark.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. President, president of our institute, Madam Tijani Borodo, the DG Financial Reporting Council, I believe being represented by Mr. Titus. Of course, the chair of a committee on public sector court, Barrister Aladi Kifasi, who had just made some few comments. The chair of the not-for-profit committee, I believe being represented by Ms. Ayotola, although I had the DG introducing Dr. Abba, but I'm not sure based on the list whether he's still there. But I believe he's ably represented. And distinguished fellows, members of the Institute, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, indeed, it's an honor and privilege to be part of the team. We have a very strong team that is going to discuss the court, but I thought mine is just to highlight some few things on behalf of who's also actively. We deeply appreciate the opportunity. We believe the Institute has a significant role to play in terms of institutionalizing corporate governance. The Institute has done very well in terms of the private sector governance, and I believe they would also support us in the public sector as well as the not-for-profit, and also to commend the committee on not-for-profit. As you are aware, this has been perhaps the most controversial court that led to so many changes, even in the Financial Reporting Council. I hope, Titus, I'm right. But we thank God that the Financial Reporting Council, the Institute, and the committee had been able to walk through some level of an acceptable code of corporate governance for not-for-profit, basically, and we thank you for that effort. We believe the Institute has a significant role. You are engaging us, and you also engage other stakeholders. We've also noted your involvement, particularly in respect of the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018, and the significant role you play. And I believe this time around you will also play the same role. As you are aware, we have two courts, one on public sector, the other not-for-profit, and I hope and pray that we should be able to address that. For the court for the public sector, perhaps the most significant court we should also appreciate and understand, given the fact that we are looking at 3 tiers of government, the federal, the states, and as well as the local government, and the role now being given to local government underscores the need for a very, very strong corporate governance. And hope and pray the Financial Reporting Council and the Institute would participate effectively in institutionalizing. For us, corporate governance means basically the DNA. In other words, it's the culture. It's not about rules and regulation. It's not about prescriptive guidelines, but it's about developing that culture that indeed, based on my DNA, I can comply with the minimum requirement of a code of corporate governance. And I want to believe that this is what we should be looking for. So perhaps we've started a journey, and this is a journey that perhaps some of us may just eventually not see the fruits effectively, given the fact that when you are influencing corporate behavior or behaviors of individual, it takes a lot of effort and it takes a long time. But I believe we are laying the foundation, and what we need as individuals is to see how do we continuously build on this foundation with a view to ensuring that we've institutionalized a strong corporate governance without somebody looking forward to say, well, it is because the court said I should behave this way, and that's why I'm behaving that way. And I hope and pray that at least we'll understand and appreciate that this is a court that tries to influence a code of corporate governance, particularly in the public sector, and very challenging significantly. But also is a court that tries to say, okay, fine. It's not about the rules and regulation, but it's about applying and explaining. So in other words, these are the minimum agreed practices that we need to understand. These are the principles that we need to understand, and how do you comply with that? And when we comply, we don't comply, we need to explain that. Now with that, essentially what we are doing is we are not being prescriptive, but at the same time, we're also ensuring that our behaviors could be easily managed. Has a lot of advantages to us in the public sector. Improved public service delivery, of course, is a major issue. Transparency and accountability. Of course, we have various aspects and framework within the public sector that tries to promote transparency. But transparency and accountability is about the individual. How do the individual behave? And how do they behave collectively, whether as management, as board, or as committee? And I hope and pray that this code will provide that. And also, by doing that, then we should be reducing corruption and mismanagement of our funds, which of course all of us are aware that this has been perhaps the most challenging aspect of our lives, both private and public life. And I hope and pray that with institutionalizing this aspect, we may be reaching out to a more acceptable standard. By doing that, of course, whether we like it or not, what we do in public sector impacts on the private sector. As an investor, do I want to invest in Nigeria? Yes, I want to invest in Nigeria because I believe there is a very transparent regulatory and supervisory framework. There's a very transparent governance structure that indeed, when they said yes, yes means yes, and I will not come put in my money and somebody comes to say, no, we have changed the rules of the game and this is going to be different. So, of course, it's significant. And we know as a country, as a community, there's no way we can survive in isolation. We need public and foreign investment to ensure that at least we drive our economy, and particularly now. And given the fact that we have a government that is quite ambitious and wants to attract foreign investment, obviously this is a priority for us to focus on. So we hope and pray that we'll get a very strong institutional framework for implementation. As you are aware, the private sector code is virtually been implemented by professionals that have been certified by various professional institutes, and it has worked. And without being immodest, one can basically say that the private sector has developed a very, very comprehensive and has virtually gone into what we can call a culture-based compliance with the corporate governance. So we hope we can achieve that. But then how do we achieve that? We achieve that by, one, getting a very strong institutional framework that will continue to monitor. And I hope public sector entities would yield themselves to getting professionals to review their practices, not just Office of the Accountant General or perhaps the Auditor General, but perhaps members of the Chartered Institute of Directors and other relevant institutes. I think this is something we need to get the private sector to drive that compliance. And the exposure, as we are aware, whatever that is outside, for me, that is the most important thing. If you don't come out and say it, people would not know, and we will not be in a position to judge you. So we hope this code will ensure that everything about corporate governance in the public sector will also be opened. Today, companies that are covered by the private sector code are required to publish certain information, both on their website and other medium of communication. I think we need to encourage that so that as an ordinary citizen, I can ask the governor of the central bank or the ND of NNPC to say, hey, I reviewed your corporate governance report prepared by EY or any other institution, that indeed this is what we need to, that's what we need to do. So we hope and pray that you'll also advise that. But for us, today's discussion, Mr. President, is about, as my chairman said, is about seeking your views and opinion. It matters a lot, and you cover a substantial part of business and as well as public sector entities. So we expect that now and of course subsequently we'll get a feedback. And I'm happy that we have set up different and competent teams that will discuss that for the public sector, being led by Dr. Titus and some of our colleagues would also expose that. But I think for us is what takeaway can we have? Moving forward, how do we build that collaboration? In other words, Financial Reporting Council building collaboration with the Chartered Institute of Directors to say, these are the areas we need to support. The beauty of it, if they're aware, is that the Financial Reporting Council say, hey, we're not going to be involved in day-to-day monitoring, but is to promote those institutions that will ensure that we have a very significant compliance or perhaps build culture in terms of corporate governance. And that's what they have done in the private sector. And I want to believe that Titus and his team would also adopt the same thing for the public sector. I would also want to acknowledge the role played by Anson Young. Anson Young has supported us continuously as a committee, and I believe the chair and other members will also testify to that. And it's something that we need to acknowledge here and always, that indeed they have provided that support. And hopefully by the time we get all the necessary responses, they will also assist us to compile and finalize the document on behalf of the Financial Reporting Council. Distinguished Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, it's an honor and privilege to make these few comments. And as the chair also said, apologies for taking more than perhaps the 10 minutes that was allocated to me. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. M.K. Ahmad, for the remarks. Quite detailed, I must say. And also, I'd like the emphasis on some of the key points that you highlighted. For me, it's around the relationship between the public sector and the private sector. And you said that what we do in the public sector impacts the private sector. So there's a synergy between the public sector activity and the private sector activity. We also spoke about the institutionalizing the framework. And I think for us, that is what our panel discussion will be looking at. How do we institutionalize this exposure draft? And also, how do we promote compliance and reporting? So with that, we'll be going to our panel discussion. I hope my panelists are on the call. Please, I would like the technical team to confirm if the panelists are on the call, and if possible, if we can pin them to the screen so that we can start our panel discussion. Whilst we do that, I would also like to introduce them to you. I think they are not strange faces in the corporate governance ecosystem. So, okay, thank you. I can see Nechi, I can see Dr. Nosike, Soji Apampam, and I think one more person. Let's see, one person, Salawu. I don't know if Mr. Salawu is on the call. Please, can you confirm that Mr. Salawu is on the call so that we can proceed? So whilst we start that, I'll just introduce them briefly, then we go to the panel discussion. But again, before that, I would like to encourage, and I think that has been reemphasized, earlier on, that this is more of an engagement with our participants. So I would like to encourage that you please send in your comments, send in your questions. You can use the chat box or the Q&A box on your screen. I believe that the team from the CIoD and FRCN will monitor and also provide us with the information. Okay, so thank you again. And I start with Dr. Nosike without being partial to the female. So Dr. Nosike is a member of the Public Sector Governance Code Technical Working Committee. That he also represents the Chartered Institute of Directors. He's a management and a corporate governance consultant and a board advisor to a number of blue chip organizations. So welcome to this panel discussion, Dr. Nosike. Please confirm that you can hear me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shama. Thank you.
Thank you. So next on my call is Dr. Nechi Izako. She's also the member of the Public Sector Governance Code Technical Working Committee, representing the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. She's a lawyer, she's a Chartered Secretary and Administrator, authorized corporate governance and board leadership trainer, certified corporate governance trainer, advanced anti-corruption and ethics compliance trainer. I will just give her, she's a trainer of all trainer and a board evaluator. Thank you, Dr. Nechi, for attending and for participating. Can you confirm that you can hear me, please?
Thank you, Chioma. I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
I'm
you
happy
and
to be here.
welcome. Thank you and welcome. And next on my list is Mr. Soji Apampa, another name that is not pretty much trained to the industry and the ecosystem. Mr. Apampa is an international corporate and political governance expert and a co-founder of the Convention on Business Integrity. Mr. Apampa, please, can you confirm that you can hear me? And I must say he's also He's also a member of the Public Sector Governance Code Technical Working Committee. So thank you so much for joining us. Then last on my list is Mr. Salawu Akpoti. Mr. Salawu Akpoti, please, can you confirm that you're here with us?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us. So Mr. Salawu Akpoti is a Deputy Director with the Office of the Auditor General for the Federation. He's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountant of Nigeria. He's a fellow Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. He's a fellow Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, Associate Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers of Nigeria, and a member of the Nigerian Institute of Management, and a certified performance auditor. So thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Akpoti. So here we have our panel. I would also like to emphasize again and to please appeal to the audience to please push your comments and your questions to the chat box so that we can attend to those questions. So first on my call, we have heard the keynote address and also heard from the chairman of the TWG on the importance of the public sector and also the need for a corporate governance, for a governance code for the public sector. Well, let's start this conversation with Dr. Nosike. As the chairman of the technical subgroup that put together this code, why do we need the code and what are the primary objectives of this code?
Madam Moderator, thank you very much. Let me first of all say good morning to my chairman, Barrister Kifasi, who joined after we exchanged pleasantries with the others. Good morning, sir. Now, to respond to your question, Chairman, the reasons are very clear, but I'll just try to particularize them. Now, it's wrong to say that it's simplicity that the code is coming to introduce governance in the public sector. There's already governance in the public sector. So what the code is coming to do is to help to improve the corporate governance system in the public sector. And in doing that, help to fashion systems that will enable the public sector to develop corporate governance frameworks, develop relevant policies, and then have governance systems that will enable the public sector to compete globally, improve the quality of corporate governance, improve efficiencies, and of course, strengthen institutions. You know, we keep talking about weak institutions, strengthen institutions, and then help to, you know, raise the level of competence and the corporate governance paradigm in the public sector. Don't forget that we're looking at corporate governance at the federal level. Federal level then includes the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature, and also the local government. So the objective is actually to improve corporate governance in these various sectors of the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying that there's actually governance structure in the public sector, or corporate governance like we know it in the public sector. So now I'd like to go to Mr. Akpoti, being that you have a first-hand experience and first-hand information. You represent the Office of the Auditor General for the Federation, and you understand the intricacies around the public sector. What are the chances that this code would fly or would be acceptable? And what ultimately can we do with implementation? How do we implement this code?
Thank you, my sister. Let me first of all extend my greetings to our chairman and the vice chairman. Personally, I believe that this code will succeed in the public sector because if you look at the Renew Hope agenda of the current administration, so many reforms are being introduced that are meant to show to the outside world, especially the sincerity of government, especially to encourage accountability and transparency in the way and manner public institutions are run. And this governance code in the public sector is one of the very key ways to show openness and transparency in the conduct of government businesses. And what the governance code, like Dr. Ahmad said in his speech, is meant to do is to introduce a culture of selflessness, transparency, integrity, accountability within the public sector. And over time, public sectors have always been referred to as being inefficient when you compare that to private district. Reason being that so many things at times don't get done when it should be. But with the coming on stream of this governance code in the public sector, it will open that space and encourage flexibility as well as efficiency in the public sector. And let me also tell you that my own office, the Office of Auditor General for the Federation, once this thing is gazetted by government, ensures compliance. For instance, based on the code, we will now have something like a governance statement, even in the annual report of MDAs. So, and as a key component of that, mind you, our code is apply and explain. It's also, that makes it flexible, not rigid. This is what the code states. How have you applied it? You explain and you move on. And for the private sector to have their code, and it's a good thing as we have seen the successes recorded so far. And ideally, the public sector is supposed to even be the lead, but we are just trying to do a catch-up with the private sector. So if it's successful in the private sector, then why not public sector? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. For me, it's an assurance note and a strong emphasis on it will succeed. The fact that you have mentioned your commitment to drive compliance within your own agency. So thank you for that. You also mentioned the code being an apply and explain approach. I would like to go to Dr. Nechi now. Dr. Nechi, given that this code is apply and explain, are there potential advantages or disadvantages for this approach in achieving the objective of the code, being an apply and explain approach?
Thank you for that question, Choma. That's a very interesting question indeed. And permit me to also acknowledge our chairman, as others have done. So yes, back to your question. Apply and explain has various advantages and disadvantages, I must say. One of the key advantages, as we have also seen in the private sector code, is that it allows for flexibility. You know, if you look at the public sector code, the draft, the exposure draft, you will see that it speaks to PSEs that have been defined as various categories. We talk about the ministries, the departments, the agencies. We talk about the companies and the organizations owned by the government. We talk about the executive arm of government, the legislature, and the judiciary. So you can see that there's a wide span of different kinds of organizations or entities that are involved in this. So the apply and explain bit therefore becomes very, very key, because this flexibility allows context specific implementation. So the ministries can apply it as suits them, and even a particular ministry vis-a-vis another can apply it as suits it. Then it also and then also allows the flexibility of needs and context as well. Then it also encourages innovation. With a plan, you can be creative about how you go about things, and what you need to do is to explain. Really, I think it's important to understand what apply and explain means. It means that in whatever way that you apply it, you explain what you have done, and as well. Like the MK Ahmad mentioned when he was giving his keynote speech, he talked about it being culture-based. That cultural context is also very, very key. And then I would also like to talk about the fact that it also allows for stakeholder engagement. So stakeholders can be engaged, and you get the feedback from stakeholders in your application. But on this other side of the coin, because I've just talked about some of the advantages, there are also a few disadvantages. Some of them are that, you know, sometimes it may not be consistent. There may be lack of consistency. Salah just talked about the compliance role of his own his unit, and so when they are trying to implement that compliance, it might be a bit more difficult to determine what consists of compliance in a particular context vis-a-vis another one, because there's a lack of consistency. It also risks superficial compliance. Therefore, you know, we may say, oh, okay, we will explain if, you know, how we have applied. So we don't really need to go right through, but it's very important to take note of the cultural dimension. It's an issue about the whole idea, the whole purpose of apply and explain is to create a culture of doing things right, because they are the right things to do. So we want it to become our lifestyle, our approach, the way we run. So as long as that mindset is there, the disadvantages can be minimized. But if we have this checkbox mindset, which had been our problem over time, it might be more difficult. But I think the fact that the for-profit code has been running successfully, as has been mentioned by a few people for a while, is now going to work in our advantage. It's going to help us, because now we are started getting used to a culture-based code that runs on apply and explain, and hopefully we can now extend it to the public sector as well. There are a few other disadvantages, but maybe let me stop for now, because I think I'm running out of time.
All right, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for also expanding the advantages of the approach to this code, which is apply and explain. A lot have been mentioned about openness, transparency, integrity, accountability. I think for us, we understand that those are the core tenets of corporate governance, and that binds everything together. So Soji, I'll come to you now as my integrity man, like I call you. We have seen that transparency and disclosure are like the cornerstones for codes, most especially this code. And beyond mandated disclosures, how can the public sector entity proactively engage with citizens and also the civil society organization to promote transparency and public trust? How can this happen indeed, and not just, you know, ticking of the boxes like Nietzsche mentioned?
Thank you so much, Chioma. Perhaps I will also begin by just acknowledging our chairman, Dr. Danladi Kifasi, and also the vice chairman, who is also here, Mr. M.K. Ahmed, Dr. M.K. Ahmed. Thank you very much indeed. So this is a very interesting part, because if you pick up the code and look through, you'll see that there are many sections which support each other. For example, there's a part B that talks about the principles of public life, because it tries to suggest that there is a cultural dimension to getting the code right. You know, principles like integrity, accountability, transparency, and disclosure have to be there. Then in part C, it talks about a governance framework, that you can't really run these entities without having proper governance bodies in place. And in that part C, it also requires them to have, like any other governance council or governance body, that there should be subcommittees. So there is a committee for audit and risk management, and they have specific responsibilities under the code, very specific, that is measurable, that is trackable, to see whether or not it is happening. So it's going to be difficult for it to just be tick box. Then in part D, it looks at the whole area of transparency and disclosure, and talks about all of the, yes, the financial areas and so on, but it gives the qualities that are being sought, that the public needs timely, accurate, comprehensive information that are made available in ways that are accessible to them and in formats that are usable to them. And this is where that engagement takes place. But you see, without the culture of wanting to be accountable, for instance, you will not take advantage of that, and it will just be superficial. So the code then is supported by a whole code of conduct in part E, and that code of conduct spells out whistleblowing arrangements, arrangements for addressing corruption, and even things like conflicts of interest. All of those things are addressed in the code. So you'll find that all of these provisions are auditable. It's not a code that you can just tick the box and wish for the best, because it means that outsiders can demand certain documents which the code suggests. For example, Mr. Salawu talked about annual reports, and also the section on governance that needs to be included in that annual report that the Auditor General's office will be requiring. And therefore the public too will be able to follow and see and ask questions. So the opportunity of come not just top down from those organizations, but also from the public, like citizens, civil society, and so on. Back to you, Chioma.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Soji, and also for highlighting that the codes have different parts, emphasizes on key elements of the governance operations and the governance framework. Also, we must also emphasize here that the code is a principle-based code whereby you have principles, and hence the approach of apply and explain it will be more suited for a code that has a principle-based framework. So before I come back to my panelists, I have 2 questions on the Q&A. I also like to use this time to also encourage our participants to please share your question. You can use the Q&A box on your screen. So we have one from Bernard, and I'll direct this to Dr. Nosike. Then if Mr. Akpoti can also weigh in on that, that would be great. So from Bernard said, I am curious about the relationship between the public service rules and the draft code for the public sector. Could this be touched on during this discussion? The relationship between the public sector rules and the draft code for the public sector. Dr. Nosike, do you want to attempt that? Or Mr. Akpoti? Anybody can jump on it, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Yeah, that's a very relevant and a very good question. The truth is that this code is not coming to take away the law or take away all the policies that have been there. As I said at the beginning, the code is coming to help to improve corporate governance at the federal, at the state, and the local government level. So if the exposure draft clearly recognizes relevant laws that have been there, law is superior to the code, as you know. So in fact, when this code was being built, quite a lot was considered in terms of the policies that existed at that time. And I believe they are still there in the public sector. And these were recognized. So the whole idea was to come up with a code that will not conflict in any way with the law, the policies that were there. It's up to the government to tweak the policies, but it's our belief that because the government has supported this process of developing the code, that the government would be mindful of the main objective of developing this code, which is to improve corporate governance in the public sector at the 3 levels of government. So it's not going to be a problem. We have carefully looked at the details and we have ensured that there won't be any conflict at all in terms of what is in the code and what the government will be coming up with in terms of policies.
Thank you so much. Mr. Akpoti, would you like to just comment on that as a key player in the public sector? What's your opinion with regards to the existing public sector rules with this code? What are we most likely going to see, conflicts or not?
Okay, thank you, Choma. I don't anticipate conflict. Reason being that the code is very, very clear. It's even a part of the code where you get to this thing that the code does not override our laws. And that even where there are conflicts, so to say, the law takes precedence. However, the code has come to further entrench that culture of transparency and accountability in our governance, especially of a public sector entity, which the current administration, like I said, also makes as one of its priorities. And mind you, we should also understand the fact that at the top of this process is the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, which is an agency of government that is driving it. It's at the front seat. And it's one of its mandate when you look at the Financial Reporting Council Act. In fact, they have a directorate of a corporate governance within that Financial Reporting Council setup. And in their law, they are one of their remit to develop corporate governance code and also regulate it. And that is also why the Financial Reporting Council is not in a rush or in a hurry to release it. So stakeholders engagement, which is also what is being done today, is to elicit feedback from the stakeholders and to see if there are still areas. It's not a 100% document for now, to see areas where they can see this. So the document is currently undergoing exposure and also stakeholders engagement so that they can still get their feedback here and there. I think in the end, it will have a general buy-in of the critical stakeholders in the public sector. So I don't envisage that issue of conflict between the public sector and the code. Thank you.
Staying on that, Mr. Akpoti,
yeah.
Looking at the public sector entity, it's quite a fast spread and a lot of entities. Are there any by chance or perchance any of this entity that is exempted from this code based on any enabling act or pronouncement? Any at all, or everybody's covered or captured?
All public sector entities are covered. For now, we have over, even at federal level, we have over 1,000 ministries, departments, and agencies, including corporations, the one people call parastatals. We have over 1,000. And there is no law for now that makes that exempt any MDAs from complying with the code. And even within the code, the public sector entity is well and clearly defined. That is under the scope of this this thing. In fact, it's not just MDAs, it includes even agencies that are established by Gazette, because there are some agencies that are established by Gazette, not even by an act of a national assembly. They are also expected, because they have their own governance structure in a way, they are also expected to what? Apply the code. So unless there is a law that specifically exempt an agency, and for now, there is no law that exempt any agency.
Okay, thank you. So clearly stated, and we have gotten that clarification that everybody is captured, all the public sector entity is captured by this code. So I have another question on the chat box. Nature, I'll come to you quickly, just run through some of our comments on the chat box. One is to Dr. Nosike mentioned in his comments that the governance does already exist in the public sector. Given the apply and explain approach, how would the code bring about change in the culture of non-accountability that currently exists, especially when the code does not have so much by way of penalties for non-compliance? Quite a mouthful, but Dr. Nosike, is our...
Thank you very much, Chairman. Sorry, is this from my end or Chairman's end?
Actually, from Chairman's end. You can
All right.
Yes, you hear me?
No, Chairman, we didn't hear you.
Can you hear?
Okay.
No, we lost you for
But,
some time.
Okay, is this better now?
It's better now.
Okay. Mr. Yemi, strong that currently exists in the public sector.
Well, we lost you again, but I think I have an idea of the question that you have asked. That because it's a soft code in the sense of apply and explain philosophy and approach. So the man or lady who has asked the question is concerned as to the applicability and adoption of the provisions of the code. That shouldn't be a problem. It's apply and explain. Apply and explain does not mean that those who are supposed to apply provisions of the code would refuse to apply them. All right, so it's not apply or explain. It's apply the principles and then explain how you have applied it, just like Dr. Nechi mentioned earlier on. So you'll be obliged to apply the principles and then explain how you have applied the principles and the outcomes that have come out of the application of the principles. So nobody would run away from applying the principles. What is critical here is how have you applied it? Have you applied? How have you applied it? What outcomes were you expecting? And the systems of corporate governance in terms of frameworks that you have designed, are they giving you that outcome that you expect? So again, you know, corporate governance is a journey. So it's something that we believe will move gradually. We don't expect, if we get 100% compliance at the beginning, we'll be very excited. But we expect that there will be a gradual process while appealing to officers and the personnel to apply the principles the way they should be applied. So the principles will be applied. We shouldn't be concerned about applicability. What should be of interest to us is to what extent are they applying the principles to deliver the outcomes that we expect.
Absolutely. Nechi, you want to weigh in on this a bit as we move along? You're muted, ma. Please, can you unmute?
Thank you, Chioma. Yes, please. And I'd like to actually literally weigh in on what Doc just said. Doc and when I say Doc, he's Dr. Nosike Agoke. Doc and Mr. Salao, they've been talking about, how this code applies to the public sector and whether there may be areas of challenge, and they've been explaining how those areas of challenge can be, overcome. But I thought I should also add the fact that the code is based on the principles of public life. In fact, the key context of the code is the principles of public life, which speaks to what public sector entities are supposed to be doing, what public officers are supposed to be doing. So there's no way there's any law that says to a public officer that he shouldn't carry out his work, the work that he's supposed to carry out as a public official, in line with key standards, selflessness, in line with integrity, in line with honesty, in line with hard work, in line with service, that spirit of service for the citizens and for the stakeholders. There's no way there's a law anywhere that the code will go against. No, the code actually exemplifies and supports the law. The truth is that codes are, why we say that they are not superior to law, is that they are really best practice, but they build on the foundation of the law. This code is not an exception. It is actually building on the foundation of the law. If you remember, Dr. Nosike talked about the fact that we started with the existing laws, the existing statutes in some cases, and yes, different gazettes. I think it was Salah also that mentioned gazettes in some cases that set up certain entities. We didn't develop any document that would go against this. On the contrary, we developed a document that would help the achievement of the purpose, the objectives for which the public sector is in place. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're rounding up, but we have a lot of questions on the Q&A box. One is, how will the corporate governance code ensure that there is adequate punishment for corruption and financial friction in the public and private sector in Nigeria? Corruption, punishment. Who will help? Panelists, anybody can help with this question. How do we ensure? Please go ahead, Mr. Soji. Please go ahead.
All right.
Attempt to do this. You are muted.
Please go ahead, Dr. Nosike. Please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to give a perspective, and I know Sajil and Dr. Nechi and Salah will come in, that the code has prescribed quite a lot, and some of the things that will come out of that code will be governance controls. And these are effective governance controls. So if you look at that code, you will see the issues of internal control system, the issues of audit, the issues of audit plan, the issues of several controls. The point to make here is that you don't start developing a code with a mindset that you want to catch those who are stealing money. You develop a code with a mindset that you are coming out with a system that will have controls that will ensure that there are efficiencies, that the corporate governance paradigm is good, it's globally competitive, and that those who run the system now understand that it's not business as usual, that there are new controls of governance, and it's like saying, let's not bring the garbage of the past to impact on what we're doing now. Let's just turn a new leaf. So the code is coming with some governance controls And we're hoping that these governance controls will help to, deal with the issues that the person who has asked this question has raised. So it's not a mindset of, let's come up with a code that will catch those who are stealing or those involved in corruption, but to set up a system that will guarantee that misconduct will be eliminated. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sergio, do you want to weigh in on that before we move
Yes. Yes, I'd like to add to what Dr. Nasike has just talked about. And I totally agree with what he has said. What the code does, because if you look at how would you know that this governance is taking place? How you would know is that people are consistently doing the right things and they're consistently doing things right. That would be the evidence. So right now, the code gives anybody who studies it so many points at which to be able to follow and check whether they are doing the right things and whether they are doing things right or not. And it also gives the opportunity, not just for the engagement, but also to follow up and ask that some of those things be corrected. Because right now, there's frustration. People look at the public sector, they don't get the information, they're frustrated that nothing seems to be working. But this code, number one, tries to strengthen that internal governance, that even before things spill out into the public, that you can catch what is not right that is being done, that it can be caught by this governing body, and the governing body can take responsibility for fixing it. Talk less of now when the public is now also empowered to be able to catch some of these things and weigh in on it, rather than just throw their hands up in despair.
Thank you so much, Soji. I also see, thank you so much. I also see the frustration on the chat, on my chat box with the panelists. And, there's this drive for an element of sanction, an element of fine, element of, for lack of a better word, punishment for non-compliance. Is this something that the committee consider, going forward, given that it's an exposure draft? And Mr. Akoti, I would like you to weigh in on this. Do you think that this code needs to, bring in some element of sanction, or what kind, if you feel so, what kind would you, recommend? Or if not at all, we'll just leave it as apply and explain. Mr. Akoti, your mic is muted, please.
Yes, I thank you, Choma. If the opening remark by Dr. Ahmad, he emphasized that the code that is in the public space now, in terms of a form of exposure draft, is a principle-based code. In other words, not prescriptive. When you have a rigid code that's prescriptive, that says do A, B, C, otherwise this is the punishment. Do 1, 2, 3, otherwise this is the punishment. So the code is so flexible, and again tagged apply and explain, not apply or explain. Apply and explain the way it best suited your environment. Then you apply it, then explain what you have done, how you have done it, and the outcomes that you have. And if the outcome doesn't match with the intended outcome, you are also allowed to state that. And mind you, like a doctor said, this code is a journey. We are just starting. So maybe by the time we evolve, we're just like a baby now, trying to crawl. By the time we start walking, then we can begin to look at this. So the code for now encourages all to come on board. And when you have a system that you are evolving and you want all to come on board, you don't just come up with a heavy sanction. And like I told you, those sanctions are applicable where the code is what? Prescriptive. So rather than what principle base that we have. So I want to believe, like I said, the major thing, the central theme of every public sector entity is transparency and accountability. And this code has come to further strengthen that. So who want to go against being referred to as in fact, if government can even come up tomorrow and say we are going to have an award for most accountable, most transparent, something like that. Everybody want to take his agency to come first in such a award, or so to say. It may be a system that will come up tomorrow. So making this code, putting a heavy sanction this year, will even discourage the spirit that we have at the beginning, which is to make it a principle base. So, and to touch on the issue of controls and this thing, that the code has also strengthened the internal audit function and the reporting a line of the internal auditor. This I must just mention that before we round up. So when you look at the internal audit, because it's also key, internal audit function is also key to whatever control that you want to entrench in any public sector entity. So over time, people have been complaining that, oh, internal auditor or unit is relegated to the background. It cannot, call a spade a spade. So this code has strengthened that internal audit function. And from once it's implemented or it comes into effect, we'll begin to see that a real function we expect from internal audit. Thank you.
Choma,
All right, thank you so much.
Choma, can I just give a line?
Yes, yes,
just
but
for
we
those
need
who are concerned about rewards and things that may be done. The code has a very prominent section on performance evaluation, right? So the results of performance evaluation would lead to quite a lot. And so it's not a matter of applying the code in the best way possible. Someone else is not applying the code in the best way possible. How am I going to be rewarded? There's a detailed section on performance evaluation, both for governing boards and for officers of the entity. So all this will be taken care of.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we are overshot our time. But just to attend to a question here, and also I would like to thank Mr. M.K. Ahmad for responding to some of the questions. My panelists cannot even keep up with the questions. So I would like to thank the participant for the engagement. And I think that's what this platform is about. So we'll keep the conversation going, even whilst we end this discussion. But just to highlight one question on the chatbot by Godwin Samuel: was sector sufficiently involved in coming up with this draft code? It would have been good to have the public sector operator to be part of this panel to shed light on how implementation of the draft code will affect the existing structure and the process of that. So that's why we have Mr. Samuel, thank you for your question. Yes, I must confirm to you that the public sector was carried along extensively, in drafting this code. And that's why we have on our panel, Mr. Salawu Ukoti. He's a deputy director at the Office of the Auditor General for the Federation. So he's also giving his perspective from, the horse's mouth and those that are directly affected or that will be affected by this code. So
and Chairman, our chairman is a retired head of the Civil Service of the Federation.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is a key player, that the person that understands the public sector, even in his sleep, I must say. So thank you so much, my great panelists. It was a pleasure doing this with you. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for also exposing us to some of the details we have in this code. So with that, I would have said 5 seconds for a closing remark, but I've been getting a lot of buzz from the technical team that I need to get off their screen. So maybe we'll just drop it on the chat. Just 30 seconds remark, closing remark from your end as a member of the Public Sector Governance Code. So with that, I would like to say a very big thank you, my panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the effort. Thank you also for sharing your expertise. Thank you. I'll then move the mic over to our not-for-profits team. I don't know if they are ready. Mrs. Wright is supposed to be moderating the not-for-profits session. Mrs. Wright, are you there?
We are very ready. Thank you so much.
Apologies for taking some of your time. Thank you. Over to you, Ma.
Well, I'm going to claw it back from the organizers. Thank you very much, Chioma, for that very engaging session. Good afternoon, everyone, panelists, participants, and other stakeholders. So now I'm going to introduce the keynote speaker for the not-for-profit session. And I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Ayotola Jago. She's the Chief Compliance Officer and Company Secretary of Owando PLC. And she comes here with a great deal of experience. So we will ask her to give her keynote address. I'm not going to go into much details in terms of introduction. We're very short of time, and I'm sure her profile has been made available. She was the Deputy Chair of the Technical Working Group for the non-profit space. You're very welcome, Ms. Jago, and please, can you deliver your keynote address?
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. I hope you can all hear me. Awesome, thank you. So good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Please permit me to stand on existing protocols. So first of all, it's really an honor and a privilege to stand before you, to come before you today to deliberate on what I believe to be a critical milestone in the evolution of our nation's not-for-profit sector. The truth is, I'm really encouraged actually by the attendance of this webinar. And I think this signifies our collective commitment to strengthening governance, enhancing accountability, and just building a culture of trust and greater transparency in the not-for-profit sector. I'd like to thank the organizers, the Chartered Institute of Directors of Nigeria, and in partnership with the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. And I know just how critical this code is, and how much they regard it as important in terms of advancing good governance in Nigeria. So it is with a deep sense of responsibility also that I deliver this keynote address, not only because I'm a proponent of strong corporate governance, but also I had the privilege of being the deputy chair of the committee that worked on this draft governance code for the Nigerian not-for-profit sector. And one thing I would say, well, in conjunction with, of course, I must mention my chair, Dr. Joe Abba, and also the other members of the technical working group. There were 18 of us in total that worked on this, and we're drawn from a wide range of sectors, but ably represented, able representation also from the sector. My role within the technical working group, and I think I speak for all of us, provided us with a unique perspective on the challenges and opportunities, not just the critical challenges, but also the opportunities within the not-for-profit sector. And we try to bring that to bear in the drafting of the code, to see this as compliance, creating, first of all, the right culture. Secondly, an enabling environment for innovation and growth. And thirdly, incentives. So we try to incorporate also the incentives-based aspect of compliance with this code. Because, you know, sometimes it's not just about enforcement, it's also about coming up with a code which is principles-based, which, if applied, will put that not-for-profit organization in good stead with a whole range of other stakeholders like donors. and of course, build reputation. So these things are important, I think, as we begin to consider the approach that was taken to the drafting of not just this code, but also the public sector code. I must say it was a personal privilege to collaborate with a team of dedicated professionals, everyone bringing their expertise and passion to the table. And I believe that what we've come up with will undoubtedly strengthen the transparency, accountability, and effectiveness of our not-for-profit organizations. So the not-for-profit sector in Nigeria, it's rich, it's dynamic in its history, characterized by resilience and adaptability in the face of various challenges. I mean, we really saw the sector come out and play its role at times of crisis. I can think about the COVID-19 situation where the not-for-profit sector really came out and drove a lot of the humanitarian assistance and medical assistance that was given and helped us as a nation to actually be able to scale that challenge. Over the decades, however, this sector has evolved significantly. It's grown in impact and in scope. Initially, it may have been driven by religious and charitable organizations, but it's expanded to include a myriad of other diverse entities, NGOs, foundations, trade unions, residents associations. It's wide, and we've sought to capture all of this in the code. Now, why should we have a governance code for the not-for-profit sector? And I ask this question with, I guess, playing devil's advocate. The last significant attempt by the Financial Reporting Council to institute a governance code was in 2016. And the code included specific provisions for the not-for-profit sector with a goal to enhance transparency, accountability, and governance standards within the sector. It also included sections applicable to the private and public sectors, like we heard earlier on. Unfortunately, this code was met with significant resistance and controversy, and critics argued that the FRC had overstepped its mandate by imposing stringent governance requirements, particularly on faith-based organizations and other not-for-profit entities. And the most contentious aspect was the provision limiting the tenure of heads of these organizations to a maximum of 20 years. Now, the backlash from faith-based organizations and the public led to government intervention, and the code was suspended pending a further review. I mean, one thing I must say is that the episode underscored the importance of engaging stakeholders, like we're doing now, and the FRC is doing now with these two codes, particularly those directly affected by the regulations. Again, I must say that not only did we have members of the sector represented in the technical working group, but they were going back regularly to their associations and to their own stakeholders throughout the process of drafting to ensure that this was truly representative of the sentiments of the sector. It also, I think the 2016 episode also highlighted the need to balance regulatory oversight with respect for the autonomy and operational nuances of different sectors, especially, now talking about flexibility and the fact that the different organizations within the not-for-profit sector may operate already in different ways, and we need to be able to be sensitive to that. So on Tuesday, the 9th of February, the Honorable Minister, Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, Otumba Adeniyi Adebayo, inaugurated the 18-man technical working group. Like I mentioned, under the chairmanship of Dr. Joe Abba, who was former Director General, Bureau for Public Sector Reforms, for the development of this governance code for the not-for-profit sector. We submitted our draft exposure documents to the FRC in May of 2023. And since then, there has been a series of consultations. So I must say that this consultation process has been quite detailed. So again, another question that's been asked, why have a code when we can self-regulate and we've been adequately self-regulated? There are compelling reasons. One is where you self-regulate, you will have inconsistent standards. And what this code seeks to do is to, at least on the principles-based, use a principles-based model, come up with these 12 standards and principles-based standards. And where you have inconsistency because of self-regulation, it can lead to inefficiencies and difficulties in actually benchmarking and assessing the sector's overall impact. Lack of accountability is another area. Self-regulation often relies on voluntary adherence to best practices, which may not be uniformly followed. So what this governance code does is enforces higher level of accountability. Without a governance code, conflicts of interest will go unchecked, undermining the integrity and the effectiveness of not-for-profits. And the actions of few poorly managed organizations can tarnish the reputation of the whole entire sector, where, it's just, a few bad eggs spoil it for everybody. So a governance code helps maintain high standards, or at least tells the sector that we have these high standards. Therefore, if you are not complying with these minimum standards and you cannot explain why you are not complying with them, then ... right? So what it does is establishes the standard. So apart from standardization of practices, like I said, the governance code allows for enhanced transparency and accountability, improves resource management, stakeholder confidence. Someone said earlier with the public sector code, it helps with the internal control, internal audit process. So you know what controls you need to put in place. You just know the basic tenets and building blocks that make for a well-governed not-for-profit organization. It helps build a culture, of ethical conducts that hopefully will prevent corruption, fraud, and other unethical behaviors, and also helps the not-for-profit to identify and mitigate potential risks, ensuring the long-term sustainability. Again, a well-governed organization is a sustainable organization, and we now need to begin to look at it also in light of that long-term sustainability. Above all, I would say that as Nigerian not-for-profits align with global governance standards, they can compete for international funding and collaboration, enhance their impact and reach, and create an environment that's conducive for growth in innovation and collaboration within the sector. So while self-regulation has its advantages, a governance code provides a structured, enforceable framework, and enforceable in terms of in the long term, first of all, enforceable in terms of self-enforcement, and then enforceable in terms of donor enforcement or stakeholder enforcement, because a lot of these non-for-profits will have members or they will have beneficiaries or stakeholders that can also hold them to a standard or to account. They have boards that can ensure that management of these NFPOs know what standards they are being judged against as well, before you then get to the level of the regulator. And I would say, I'm sure the regulator will put in some form of reporting, a reporting framework, so that every year the NFPO is reporting on its compliance with the code. So this not only protects the sector's reputation, but also maximizes the positive impact on society. So in drafting the code, again, I want to say that we were aware of the wide, broad spectrum of organizations that make up the not-for-profit sector in Nigeria, each one contributing uniquely to the nation's development. You have the charitable organizations, like I said, your NGOs that tackle a whole range of issues from human rights, environmental conservation. Community-based organizations were also considered, of course, faith-based organizations, foundations and trusts and advocacy groups and think tanks. Now, going back to the tenets of this code, it is principle-based, meaning that it's based on a framework or a set of guidelines that emphasize overarching values rather than detailed prescriptive rules. Application of the code is also apply or explain. And this is a regulatory approach that requires organizations to either comply or provide a clear and reasonable explanation for any deviations from those guidelines. So it is about the spirit of the law rather than the letter. And this allows for flexibility, judgment-based, ethical, and outcome-based application. The draft code, if you've not read it, I would encourage you to please read it. I'm hoping that everybody in this webinar has read it, but I'll just basically go through the 12 key principles that aim to provide a clear roadmap for effective governance in the not-for-profit sector. Vision, mission, and values. Every organization should have clearly defined vision, mission, and objectives. And it emphasizes also the role of the board and leadership of the not-for-profits in ensuring that these are effectively delivered. Adherence to laws. Now, somebody mentioned when we looked at the public sector code that there are public sector rules, there are various standards and policies and laws that, and I would say also that there are various enforcement bodies from EFCC to Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, ICPC. There are various bodies that ensure for enforcement and compliance with these laws. But also, one of the principles is that there should be adherence to whatever governing instruments, constitution, articles, or sectoral laws and regulations that guide the operation of the NFPO. Effective governing bodies, and again, this is speaking to a strong culture of independent boards, diversity, equality, and non-discrimination on the basis of gender, age, culture, religion, region, educational background, professional, all of those things are governed. Disclosures and transparency is a key area, stakeholder engagement in the need for NFPOs to actually engage their stakeholders meaningfully and provide them with information, creating that culture of inclusivity and responsiveness. And then we've come to Principle 7, which is about ethics, integrity, and conflicts of interest, something that in NFPOs is really, really critical. Sustainability, fundraising and reserve management, where it talks about the fundraising activities of NFPOs being transparent and ethical, and that NFPOs should also be prudent in engaging third-party fundraisers. And of course, when it comes to fundraising and reserves management, when it comes to things like ethics, integrity, we're also ensuring that, and disclosure and transparency, that the not-for-profit sector is not used as an avenue for money laundering or counter-terrorist financing, or terrorist financing. Financial management, a key area here, that the finances of not-for-profits should be managed in line with statutory requirements, established policies and procedures, and the highest standards of care and diligence. And all of these principles help in building trust, assurance, and of course, leading of people. How does the not-for-profit provide strong leadership to volunteers, to employees, to contractors, ensuring that these people feel valued, they have clear roles, and that they are there's a duty of care to them as well, and there's a culture of respect. Now, in drafting the code, what we did was to also look at what pertains in other jurisdictions. And again, this goes to the question of why have a code? Why not continue to self-regulate? In India, in the UK, in Australia, in Canada, in the US, they have codes for the sector, for the not-for-profit sector. Also in South Africa, we considered those codes in other jurisdictions to ensure that our proposed framework was meeting with global best practice in not-for-profit governance. And many of the principles adopted here align with international standards, reflecting our commitment to adopting globally recognized best practices. So when it comes to things like board governance, for instance, the UK Charity Governance Code outlines clear expectations for board diversity, performance evaluation of boards, conflicts of interest management, and our draft code similarly stresses the importance of well-composed and independent boards, ensuring alignment with these international benchmarks. We looked at transparency and accountability, and globally, not-for-profit organizations are increasingly being held to high standards of transparency and accountability. In fact, the International Non-Governmental Organizations Accountability Charter sets out in these principles for ethical fundraising and good governance. And our draft code's emphasis on detailed financial reporting and stakeholder communication aligns well with these global expectations. In ethical leadership, the US-based independent sector's principles for good governance and ethical practice advocates for leaders who demonstrate integrity and accountability. And again, this is why in this draft code, we have focused on ethical leadership. With risk management and sustainability, we can point to the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission governance standards, which requires organizations to actively manage risks and ensure financial sustainability. And then in terms of stakeholder engagement, the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI standards for NGOs emphasize the importance of stakeholder inclusivity and responsiveness. And so we've sought to incorporate all of these global best practice standards in the draft code. Like I said, the consultation process for both codes, I think, began in December of 2023, when the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria released the exposure draft, along with a public notice requesting stakeholders in the not-for-profit sector, interested persons, groups, associations, everyone to comment on it. And this is one of the reasons why we are continuing this consultation process today by having this dialogue. I just want to end by saying it is imperative that we engage in open, honest, and constructive dialogue. Your insights, your experiences, and feedback are invaluable in seizing this opportunity to shape a governance code that truly reflects the realities and aspirations of the not-for-profit sector in Nigeria. I urge you to critically examine the draft code. Please read it, identify areas of improvement, and propose practical solutions that will enhance its effectiveness. So let's remember that this code, above all, this draft code is not just a set of rules. It's a living document. It will evolve as the sectors evolves and grows and continues to change in terms of its dynamics. So as we move forward, our collective goal should be to be able to adopt a code for the sector that not only meets international best practice, but also resonates with the unique context of Nigeria and who we are in Nigeria. A code that empowers organizations to operate with integrity and foster public trust. I cannot overemphasize the need to foster public trust in the sector, and also to maximize, therefore, our impact on society. We are confident that with your active participation and collaboration, we will be able to achieve this goal, and that we will be able to create a not-for-profit sector that's a beacon of excellence, accountability, and social progress. So in conclusion, let us seize this opportunity to strengthen the foundations of the not-for-profit sector in Nigeria. Please let's work together to ensure that the draft Nigeria Not-for-Profit Governance Code becomes a transformative tool for good governance, driving us towards a more equitable future for all. Thank you so much, and I look forward to our fruitful discussions and the positive outcomes that will emerge from this consultation process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jagun, for providing, the context for discussions on this particular code. You're right, a lot is at stake from a funding perspective, reputational perspective, not just for the individual practitioners, but for the country as a whole. So thank you very much. And we're now just going to very quickly jump into the conversation. We are a bit pressed for time. I will very quickly introduce, very high level, the panelists to discuss the not-for-profit code. Dr. Ijoma Anaso, Deputy Registrar of the Institute of Accountants, a member of the Technical Working Committee. Thank you very much, Dr. Anaso.
Thank you. It's good to be.
Thank you. Salman Alaji Salman. He's a legal practitioner, serves in the National Assembly as the senior legislative aide to the chairman, Senate Committee on Agric and Rural Development. You're very welcome, Alaji Salman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then next we have Mr. Tolulope Shonaike, Deputy Director and Head of Litigation in the Compliance Department at the Corporate Affairs Commission. You're welcome, Mr. Shonaike. Thank you for being here. And then last but certainly not the least, we have Mr. Oyebisi.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We have Mr. Oyebisi Olusheyi, who is the Executive Director of the Nigerian Network of NGOs. You're welcome, Mr. Olusheyi.
Good to join you, ma'am.
Thank you. So we're going to jump right in. My first question, I'm going to ask the panelists a question each, and then I'm going to throw it open to participants, because really it is about the feedback, your questions, your comments, your perspectives that is key to this session. So can you, start to populate the Q&A box, and we will come to you very shortly. But I'm going to start with Mr. Shonaike. So there are a great number of not-for-profit organizations operating in Nigeria. And I dare say many, if not most, are not registered with the CAC. So you sort of get a sense of an informal sector. So the question is, how will this impact CAC's role in ensuring compliance with the code? Yes, we know it's apply or explain. So it's largely moral suasion, if you can put it that way. But how does this impact the CAC's role in terms of ensuring compliance?
Thank you very much. I think the first thing we need to note is that associating the rights to associations as to coming together to prosecute legitimate objectives is actually a fundamental right. It's free. So we need to know also that associations do not have to be registered to be legitimate. So you have quite a number, yes, particularly at subnational levels. Usually they are the small ones, the micro-sized operations that are not registered. And the code recognizes this fact. While the code makes recommendations and principles and guidelines for all sizes, all types and forms, the extent of application will depend, again, on the size, on the operations, on the complexities. So for the CAC, why most of them will register, particularly under the incorporated trustees, which actually houses most of this, or the more number of these NFPOs. The other form will be limited by guarantee. Now, why they register is to take advantage of the incidence of registration, to have a corporate personality that can operate in its own name, to build trust, maintain accounts, and all of that. Now, for us, again, if you look at the CAMA, particularly with those registered as NGOs, you find that even the CAMA itself, that's the Companies and Allied Act, Part F, is not so intrusive, in regulating the NFPOs. And this is understandable. This sector actually provides social interventions using their own resources without any expectation of returns. Their returns and satisfaction is by way of mission fulfillment, beneficiary satisfaction, public trust. So we are happy that we have these prescriptions. I mean, not necessarily prescriptions, but recommendations and guidelines that, yeah, they may be just suasions, but if you look at the code, if you read through it, you find that there are mechanisms that would lend its application to NFPOs because of mileage. Don't forget that for critical concerns for NFPOs, mission fulfillment, donor value, beneficiary satisfaction, public trust. These 4 concerns are critical to the success and continued sustainability of any organization, particularly voluntary organizations like this. So for the commission, would the law support some of this? I hear the argument about non-enforceability and all of that. Interestingly, for those that are registered under the Act, there's actually some provision for sanctions. So the law, CAMA itself, will support the enforcement. Most of those prescriptions are actually some of the prescriptions of the Companies and Allied Matters Act. And generally, associations are not allowed to go outside their stated objectives. You are not allowed to waste resources of the organization. You are not allowed to divert. Conflict of interest is also prohibited. Any of these can be grounds for dissolution and sanctions, even imprisonment. So we have no doubt, we have no fear that the appeal or the application of this code, though it's applied or explained and it's elective, there are fallbacks in the law to promote their enforceability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shonaike, for that. And, you know, it's good that you raised that one of the key considerations for players in this space is the donor value. So I'm going to go to Dr. Anaso. Now, in 2023, I think, Nigeria was downgraded by the Financial Action Task Force to the gray zone. And not-for-profit entities can be used or allegedly used for the as a channel for illicit funds, right? So when you look at the code, there's actually no specific reference to donor due diligence. So, you know, can you speak a bit more to this? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, the code, I want to also thank the chairman of the committee and other members of the committee that I see online. So the code doesn't specifically talk about donor due diligence. However, we had, like the public sector codes, we also leveraged on established acts and established legislation. And we believe that for these organizations to exist in our jurisdiction, they have to be law-abiding. Recall that the purpose of the code, like we've consistently stated, is to serve as a fundamental value system that significantly influences the well-being of businesses at all levels, whether at the macro level or at the broader economic level. So it's expected, definitely, because these organizations are expected to register with SCUMO, that's the special unit responsible for money laundering. So it's expected that when that registration is carried out, those due diligence, those checks will be carried out. So it's, even though it's not explicitly covered, like we said, the code is just like a guidance system, and we hope to expand the code as this sector further develops. So we have full assurance that this the issue of donors being that's illicit, the issue of organizations like that being used by organizations that are regarded as corrupt or probably endangering us or exposing us to illicit financial flows, we are assured that they are covered under ICPC, under the EFCC, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anaso. I'm going to go to Alhaji Salman now. You're a lawyer. Are there any framework or guidelines that may conflict with the provisions of this code and thereby hamper compliance by the not-for-profit players?
Thank you so much. Well, absolutely not. Because if you look at and try to understand that the key principle of the code is based on the assumptions that organizations are already operating within the confine of their own laws and their rules. So because it's an apply and explain code, the assumption we have is that, yes, the non-for-profit organizations are already complying with their relevant laws and every other thing. So there's no any issue regarding conflict. It's not envisaged. However, if you look at the codes, after setting out each of the principles, and I must at this juncture thank Mrs. Ayotola Jagun for giving that very comprehensive encapsulating what the 12 principles stands for. Now, each of these principles have a recommendations under them, and they're expected to, each of the organizations are expected to apply within the sizes and structure they are. So we don't envisage, there's no anywhere these rules conflict with existing rules of each of the organizations, whether it's a charitable organizations, whether it's an organizations like the Nigerian Bar Associations, or whether it's any charitable form of organization. That is not envisaged at all. And I believe that, just like it has been explained before, the application of this code will ensure accountability, better operations of all the organizations. And that's why it's recommended for every organization who has elected to apply the code to, at the end of the year, make a statement in the annual general statement explaining what they have done. So it's something that put them in the best practice, which is similar to what operates across best practices around the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And then my final question, at least for this round, will go to Mr. Oluseyi. In this code, there's talk around board composition, at least for small, medium, and large NPFOs. Sorry, NFPOs. But there's nothing specific about tenor limits. I mean, and we all know the benefits of setting limits for directors on a board. So, Mr. Oluseyi, can you please throw more light as to why this was perhaps not put on a front burner? Thank you.
Okay, let me thank CIoD and FRC for this very important conversation, but also to say that regulating the nonprofit sector can be very complex. Complex because of its diversity. And when you take that back to the freedom of association conversation that Mr. Shonaike established, then linking it also to the due diligence conversation that you started, which when you look at the FATF regulations now, nonprofits now do not need to do any due diligence, but they should know their customers. Then also linking it also to applicable laws. We have also gone ahead to have a national risk assessment to look at which nonprofits, are susceptible to being used as conduits for money laundering. While the narrative around the sector also being used as conduit for money laundering has gone for way too long, we've not also been able to get any evidence for that. But why have I situated all of that is also to say that the currency that we enjoy and which Mr. Shonaike established as nonprofits is that of public trust. And for you to earn public trust, it actually starts from your governance. And that's why in Kama, you can't start a nonprofit if you don't have 2 or more board members. Okay, now that takes me down to the conversation on tenure. The tenure is always guided by the nonprofit life cycle, all right, from the startup phase to the growth phase to the declining phase and also the rejuvenation phase. Sometimes when you are starting a nonprofit, and people see us sometimes as corporate burgers, because at that startup phase, you're trying to shape the vision. You're asking around, who can help you? Who can do this? Who can do X, Y, Z? Within that startup phase alone, you're spending 5, 6, 7, 8 years, all right, still struggling to get to a stage where you can have some level of appreciation for what you do. And then you can have enough supporters or donor base. So that's why that tenure limit at times might impede on the growth of that organization. Because tell you what, we all, from the altruistic value that we get in sitting on boards, you don't want to sit on the board of a small nonprofit. Most times you want to sit on the board of an organization that is big, doing big things, and that helps your own altruistic, purposes as well. So that becomes a challenge, because if you then say that 15 years or 10 years or 2 terms should be, of course, corporate governance is fine, we totally agree. So why that is silent is, again, to look at that size. If you're small, you need as many individuals that can stay with you on the journey to when you now get to a starting stage where your corporate governance becomes your natural DNA, all right? But if you're nano, again, we need to start talking about that tenure limit. So the dynamics of the sector at times means that we have to understand that journey, understand that life cycle, but also understand the diversity and the complexities. As the Nigerian Network of NGOs, for instance, tenure limit is important because, again, you deal with over 4,000 members. You need that stakeholder inclusion. You need to be able to ensure that you are practicing what is meant to be practiced in terms of corporate governance because you're large. So it's the understanding that we brought into the design of this code. Again, understand that codes like these are developed in 3 ways. 1, government-led, like the case of Australia. 2, civil society-led, like the case of the United Kingdom. And government civil society-led, like you have in the likes of Colorado and all of those places. So for us in Nigeria, we have civil society government-led. So that document was co-created. We started from the scratch, all bringing our insights and foresights into a document that you have today and that we're talking about. Over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oluseyi, but I'm going to push this a bit further. So, I mean, you do have a very valid point when you say that the smaller entities may struggle finding qualified individuals who'd be willing to serve on their boards for various reasons. But what about the large ones? Because we're looking at an entire spectrum. What about the larger ones that have that profile, that have that financial ability and all of that?
The large ones are already practicing this. The large ones are already practicing this. Even sometimes it's by donor requirements, all right? They're asking you to look at your board policy and to see what your succession in terms of board looks like and also in terms of management. So when we talk about large, these are organizations that are at the end of the spectrum and that they understand what corporate governance means. 1, to their regulatory compliance. 2, to the public trust that they need to build. And 3, to one of the characteristics that is very important to them that Mr. Shonaike mentioned, which is that donor trust. All right. So the larger ones are already practicing this. In fact, when you look at the code, it is easier for the larger ones to practice it because this is within their DNA already. This is what they do on a daily basis. Where we would struggle would be with the smaller ones or the nano ones and very few medium-sized ones as well.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'm going to go to the Q&A box. There are already some questions. I'm going to take the one, because when the guest of honor gave his address, he did mention the controversy around the not-for-profit code that was attempted a few years back. And Mr. Oyebanji has said that one of the areas of pushback was from faith-based organizations. In this draft, what are the significant provisions that may impact on such organizations? And I'm going to hand this question over to Alhaji Salman to give us his perspective. Thank you, Alhaji Salman.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And just before going on with that, just to add to what Mr. Oluseyi said, we have to understand the distinctive attribute of NFPOs, that they're not for profit. So it's a little bit different from when you're looking at profit organization. And that also accounts for the reason why the tenure is not an issue, because basically they're just there to close social gaps and do some other things, to make life more worthy. So that also explains it. Now, going back to the question regarding the freight issue. Well, in 2016, when the initial draft was drafted, one of the key failures, or one of the reasons what accounted for the failure, was what, as at that time, was not done. For instance, now, the engagement we're having presently was not done at the time, so a lot of people were not able to understand what the code was meant for, and like that. So there was an assumption and misconception by the public as at that time regarding, the government is trying to put some stringent regulations in place. Now, which is why I'm commending the FRC for what they have done. There's been several engagements now that a lot of people know what this draft exposure is all about. And one of the things is that, just like Mr. Oluseyi has said, this draft is not capping any tenor regarding operation of an NFPO. Because, you understand, once you are in accordance with your existing established rules and legal requirements, you understand, the code is just to put you in a better best practice and to make you more accountable to those people. Now, in respect to faith organizations, some of them, unlike smaller NFPOs, have board of trustees, they have governing boards. Now, there are provisions already in the code which specifically deals with that. Like, if you look at the Principle 1, which provides for the mission, vision, and alignment, and Principle 1, 2, 3, basically on what the board roles and responsibility is. Now, this includes both the board, the governing council, or the trustees, as it may be, setting out specific responsibility, what they're expected to do. And one of the key responsibility, which differs from other code, is that presently now, you understand, you can't have, it's not the best practice to have someone act as a chairman and also as a managing director of an organization. So that for you to have that separation of role in order to bring about more accountability and more public confidence in the system. So there's a diversion, there's a separation of those roles right now, which is encouraged for any NFPO that decide to adopt the code. So that is an addition which will put every organization and the best practice, which is similar to what operates around the world. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Then also on the conflict of interest, yes, also on the conflict of interest, there are specific provisions in the rules that deals with conflict of interest. Specific, if you look at the Principle 7, with all the recommended guidelines, so that any NFPO cannot have someone that will bring his interest into conflict with what the original idea or what the original mission and visions of what the NFPO is supposed to do. And that's why the board are more empowered to put principles in place to ensure that the visions, missions of each organization are repeatedly checked to ensure that those organizations are working in alignment with what their vision is. And if there's any need for them to change what their mission and vision is, to at least adhere to what the best practice we know around the world. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you very much for that, Alhaji Salman. I understand Ms. Jagu would like to answer a question in the Q&A, but before I go to Ms. Jagu, I want to again push this conversation further. You talked about conflict of interest. Now, a key way of dealing with that really is through a whistleblowing policy, right? But in the code, the micro entities are exempt from, a whistleblowing policy. Can you please explain why this is so? Since it's such a key aspect of keeping people on the straight and narrow. Alhaji Salman. Yes.
Well, regarding the whistleblowing policy, if you look at the principles under Principle 11, it provides for whistleblowing policy, especially 11.3. Now, we need to understand that the code defines different NFPOs whether it's a small NFPO, whether it's a large NFPO, whether it's a medium NFPO, depending on your structures and your sizes. Now, for micro NFPO, there are NFPOs, not-for-profit organizations, that their turnovers in the last 2 years is not more than ₦1 million, not up to 10 million naira. It's not as if the whistleblowing policy exclude them, but it doesn't make it mandatory, sort of. They can elect to. Now, the minimum requirement is that for each of the codes, for each of the principles under the codes, any NFPO, whether you are micro, medium, small, or large, you are enjoined to adhere to the principles of the code. But in drafting these codes, we do not want to put unnecessary burden on very micro, small organizations that their turnover are relatively very little compared to what larger organizations like Mr. Oluseyi has alluded to. We have organizations doing between 100 to 1 billion and over in 2 years. So you can't compare them with the confidence expected from the donor agencies giving a little amount of money to a smaller organization, and that accounts for that. But it's not as if any micro organization that is willing to take up that responsibility without necessarily putting additional burden on them, it's not as if they're not allowed to. Like we said, it's an apply and explain principle. So for any organization that feels it's adequate for them to be able to, without necessarily putting any financial burden on them, they're very well encouraged to. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you for that, providing that clarity. Ms. Jagu, I don't know which question you would like to answer. Do you want to unmute and talk us through it?
Actually, no, I did not want to answer any question. I just wanted to be able to assist with answering some of the questions in the Q&A that you would not get back to, like people who had asked for copies of the code, soft copies of the code. I'm not a panelist, so I will hold my fire. Thank you.
You hold your fire. All right. Thank you. Okay, there's an interesting comment by Charles Okoye. Moral suasion has never worked in Africa. Dr. Ananso, I'm going to, I see you smiling.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, morals, I just want to say it may be the contributor's opinion, but when we want to change a value system, we have to start from somewhere. And yes, these are the low-hanging fruits. And I believe with time, we're going to have a minimum standard among all not-for-profit organizations, and we can raise the bar. What we are trying to do here is that, like Mr. Sonaike has properly defined, he has talked about the concerns of the NFPOs as mission fulfillment, donor value, beneficiary satisfaction, and public trust. Yes, if an organization that is in truth an NFPO and is concerned about these things will ensure that it abides by the code. And the code is actually helping, especially the micro organizations, like our lawyer just pointed out. It's helping those micro organizations to be aware of what they may need to do to get the public trust that they need to be able to grow their donor pool and so on and so forth. So I believe that, yes, moral suasion may not have worked in some instances. And I know that there has been a cry for punitive measures in the comments section. However, it's necessary for us to document and establish these codes and begin to apply them, and we'll see our value systems change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And you're right. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's, little drops of water, little grains of sand, as we begin to try and enforce the codes. Another question is around the buy-in with the Code of Public Bureau and EFCC, particularly EFCC that has enforcement powers. What did the working group What steps did the working group do to engage these agencies? I will throw that to Mr. Shonaike.
Yeah, well, for that, EFCC was also represented on the committee on technical working group. And we also had somebody, even though it was not in that capacity, it was somebody from a credit bureau enterprise who sat in with us while we're formulating all of these. So yes, we had their buy-in, we had the benefit of their contributions, their insights. And just to also mention, add that one of the strategies that was employed this time around to avoid the situation of 2016 with the faith-based organizations was to have their representation on the technical working group. I mean, we had the representation of the Christian Association of Nigeria. I mean, they did nominate, and the nominee sat with us throughout the proceedings, indicating that they are willing, they are not averse to adopting practices and principles, guidelines that will ensure that they fulfill their objectives, their faith-based objectives. The challenge then was that they were probably not carried along, or maybe not well enough, you know. So to avoid that pitfall, we had them represented, and we also had their input in what turned out today that we're looking at. The same thing with representation from the Islamic Council. There was somebody there representing them, and we discussed. They were part of the talk. They're part of the conversation leading to this point.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Shonaike. Gbenga says he wants to believe that thresholds have been set on the percentage of proceeds that should be applied to further social programs. Now, we know that some donors will be specific as to the application. They're looking at a project or a particular cause, but for some other donors, it's loose. But in terms of the percentage of proceeds that should go to a cause, is that something that the code has contemplated at all, Mr. Oluseyi?
So again, when you look at the nature of the code, we have tried not to be prescriptive, because by the freedom of association rights of citizens, they have the right to self-governing. They can decide and say, this is how we want to govern ourselves. Now, the incentive to register and be able to make use of codes like this is because of the fact that you want to earn public trust or be able to use services provided by government that you naturally need a registration for. Having said that, is to now also go back to the conversation around SCUMOL itself, which is a statutory regulation that helps us to deal with the conversation on money laundering and terrorism financing. Or to say that the Financial Action Task Force, having understood the peculiarities of civil society globally, has also provided some framework for how regulation of the sector needs to be done, meaning that you have to do a national risk assessment to look at which organizations are vulnerable, then tailor your regulations towards them. And that's what we've done in Nigeria now. So the organizations that are vulnerable will be those working in areas of humanitarian action in the Northeast and also service-based NGOs, because that is where the research has pointed us to. So the law now says that every 2 years, we'll do a review to see where the risks are and then address those as it were. So you begin to see that for you now not to be susceptible to being used for conduit for money laundering, you need a self-governing system. Whether you apply the code or you do not apply the code, you must self-govern in a way that ensures that when I check your system, you are not running against any law. All right. So even if you and that's why the apply and explain principle is what is accepted in terms of international human rights conversations around a code like this, that it will be voluntary, or you apply or explain. So by the time you apply, you tell us how you are using this code to ensure corporate governance. If you are also not applying it, explain. Maybe your internal controls are even stronger than this code that we're talking about. Or there's a self-regulation mechanism that you have subscribed to that is stronger than the code of corporate governance that is coming from both government and civil society as co-led. So you need to understand that, again, the complexities of the sector, while some would be for regulation, some would be anti-regulation. In business, you don't have that luxury. But part of that freedom of association is I can decide to say, yeah, I don't want to register with you. Whatever, give me an incentive to register. So for the code, the incentive to make use of that code is when you look at the provisions and you say to yourself, do we want to remain small or we want to move to the larger scale? Or do we want to look at what others are doing? So there's a peer pressure nature of that code itself. So whether you're looking at for moral suasion, we call it incentive, or the peer pressure nature of big organizations that are doing well, how are they doing it? Then you notice that they are complying, you notice that they have good corporate governance, and you're saying to yourself, why not if not? All right. So the code itself is trying to balance a lot of things. Of course, also understanding that there are a lot of conversations that need to happen, from the traditional nonprofits to the religious nonprofits, whom Mr. Shonake just mentioned that we're also in the room, plus also to look at social enterprises, then now look at associations and other within that civil society family. So it's sometimes complex to regulate that space, and that's why we've restricted ourselves to not be prescriptive, to say that your self-governing nature can cover a lot of things, while also ensuring that the basic minimum that we have there helps us to guarantee corporate governance for the benefit of the common.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I guess because, going through the comments and questions, I guess a concern, this whole moral suasion, apply or explain posture is, this space is considered a high risk space, and where we are as a nation. So perhaps in some quarters, there's a belief that there's a need for more stringent governance standards. Well, not so much standards, but enforcement of application. But again, as Dr. Anaso had indicated, let's at least start and see where we go. I believe because a lot of the questions had been answered during the public sector code, I'm not seeing any additional questions here that have not been addressed in one form or the other. So at this point, I'm going to ask the IT department to put up a poll, after which we can come back and take any additional questions. So IT, please, can you put up the poll? And we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Sorry, ma'am.
So we would kindly ask participants and panelists to please, there are two questions. I believe you're going to have to scroll up after a minute or so that they can see the second question.
Host and panelists can vote. Is that correct?
Yes, panelists can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe CIoD will provide us with the results of the poll. It will be interesting to see. There's a couple of comments / questions. Mohammed Santuraki, was there any discussion around the tax status of faith-based, and that has come up a couple of times actually, of faith-based associations? It may not be a direct issue for corporate governance, but it is related to being a good corporate citizen. Yes, and that's sort of the same comment or question made by Gbenga Falana. So, Dr. Anaso, do you want to speak to that?
It will be my pleasure. So looking at the codes, there are no specific, there's no specific reference. The code does not explicitly discuss the tax status of faith-based organizations. However, the code includes comprehensive governance principles that apply universally to all not-for-profit organizations, including faith-based ones. So there are key provisions that likely impact faith-based organizations that could influence their tax-related responsibilities, such as adherence to law, which is Principle 2. There is a financial management Principle 10, which requires proper financial oversight and the maintenance of accurate records. Then also there's a transparency and disclosure Principle 5, which calls for accurate disclosure of financial activities and governance practices, indirectly impacting on how they report their tax-related information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. In the absence of any other question that has not been addressed in the course of this conversation, I'm going to ask the panelists in 30 seconds to just, if you were asked to give not-for-profit organizations one piece of advice as it relates to this code, what will it be? And I'm going to start with Mr. Shonaike. Even though you've turned off your video, I know you'll turn it back on.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, I had some intervening issues to address. Yeah, what I would strongly, advise NFPOs to do is to have an open mind and see this code, even though it's on a apply or explain basis, as a code that is designed to help them fulfill their missions, their objectives, by placing a governance structure that promotes transparency, integrity, accountability, that will help them to achieve donor value, beneficiary satisfaction, public confidence, and trust in their operations. So by and large, at the end of the day, it is about them and the system.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shonaike. Now we're going to go to Alhaji Salman. You're muted, sir. You're muted.
Thank you for that. Well, my advice to the non-for-profit organizations, regardless of your structures and your size, whether you are micro, whether you are small, medium, or large, is for you to embrace the code. Bearing in mind that already, if you are acting and operating within the legal confines and you are fulfilling all your responsibility, it's not going to be a problem for you to be able to adopt the code. And just like Mr. Shonaike had pointed out, every dream of a non-profit organization is to grow. And this code is one that will allow you to show your accountability and take you to the next level. If you are small, you can transmit into a bigger and a larger NFPO. So I believe it's something that is very positive and one that will make a very good impact for them and also for the donors as well and the general public at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alhaji Salman. Dr. Anaso.
Thank you so much. So a lot of the NPOs, a significant percentage of the NFPOs are in the micro segments. And as much as it's a code that is not prescriptive, like my other panelists have said, it would facilitate growth. So I will encourage all the organizations in this sector, especially in the ones in the micro end of the spectrum, to commence development and updating of their policies and procedures to align with the governance group, because it's a definite trajectory towards their growth and expansion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anaso. And last but not the least, again, Mr. Oluseyi.
I think whether you're a pro or anti-regulation civil society, one thing that is important is that we all do good across communities. And in doing the good, we have to do the good better and properly. So I do think, in my own opinion, this is my personal opinion, that code, embodies what would help you to do better. All right. If I now speak as executive director of the Nigerian Network of NGOs, I have looked at the code. It is in line with our values as a sector. And also now sitting on that committee that ensured that I fought for all of those principles. I think that code represents us as a sector. Over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oluseyi. So there we have it. Let's keep an open mind. Governance is key, not just about accountability and transparency, but also for prosperity. So business outcomes can be achieved and indeed exceeded. Thank you very much to the panelists, Dr. Anaso, Mr. Oluseyi, Mr. Shonaike Alhaji Salman. Thank you very much for providing insights, perspective, for helping to clarify the issues. Thank you so much to the participants for your comments, for your questions, for your suggestions. And I will hand over now back to Mr. Dele Alimi, DG CIoD. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wright, and of course, by extension, also Mrs. Modi, for 2 wonderful sessions. Yes, we overshot our time, but I really think it was worth our while, and I'm sure participants will agree with me. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Titus Osawe, who I learned is representing the ES of the Financial Reporting Council, to please give the vote of thanks. Thank you very much. Mr. Osawe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, DG. I really want to thank everybody on behalf of my Executive Secretary, Chief Executive, Dr. Rabi Olowo. We really want to say a big thank you to the CIoD for this wonderful collaboration again. Of course, it would be proper for me to at least mention certain names, starting with the President of Council, Laji Tijani Orodo. I am also proud to be associated with him. A couple of months ago, we saw him in one other engagement that was done on this same code. He was there all through, and it's good to know that, of course, he has helped us in pushing that of the CIoD. We are very, very grateful, sir. And of course, that will extend the greetings to the members of Council of CIoD and all members. But then we also need to thank the team that has been here today, starting with my chairman, the chairman of the Technical Working Group. That's what we call them, please. Technical Working Group, TWG for short. The chairman of the Technical Working Group for the Public Sector Governance Code, Barrister Danladi Kifasi, FCAMNI, of course, a former head of service of the Federation. I want to thank you, sir, for finding time to be with us all through. It has been one long session, almost 3 hours now. We have crossed 2.5 hours. Thank you, sir, for staying all through and for giving us the support, as you have always done, with the wealth of experience that you brought to the table in the development of the code. It's still a work in progress, but we know that by God's grace, we will get to the very end of it. I also want to thank in absentia the chairman of the technical working group for the non-for-profit, Dr. Joe Abba, ably represented by the assistants, by the deputy chair person, who also today served as the keynote speaker for the non-for-profit, and that's Ms. Ayotola Jagun. Thank you so much for the 2 caps you wore. Also mentioned, worthy of mention is our own very dear Mr. M.K. Ahmad, Deputy Chairman for the Public Sector Governance Code, but we will never forget how he midwifed as chairman of the NCCG 2018. We are very grateful, sir, for always bringing your wealth of experience in things that have to do with corporate governance. I want to thank all the panelists, discussants, as it were. We've been on this journey since February 9, 2023, and I'm sure we will all be there when the unveiling will be done by the grace of God still this year, just to align with what Alhaji Brodo already said. It's been a very engaging discussion for the last 2.5 plus, almost 3 hours now. I also want to thank the participants. Very wonderful audience indeed. At some point in time, we're about 204 or 205, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for staying with us all through. As I round up, I want to thank the very wonderful moderators, the 2 personalities that helped us today, Mrs. Bimbola Wright for the non-for-profit, and Mrs. Modi, Chioma Modi, who also, by the way, is also a part of the technical working group for the Public Sector Governance Code. You did wonderfully well. We are grateful, very, very, very grateful. I also won't forget our wonderful DG who gave us this platform. We discussed about it informally, but thank God that he put the formal part of it into action and we are able to have this wonderful session today. It's a comment gathering session, which is what we are doing now to ensure that all stakeholders are properly represented by way of being part of the 2 codes. Like it was already acknowledged, whatever mistake we thought we made, whatever shortcomings that we are kind of observed in the 2016 code as it relates to public sector and non-for-profit, FRC is desirous not to tread that part again. So we have learned our lessons and we have tried as much as possible to ensure that such things don't happen. And that's why even in the composition of the technical working group, we ensure that everyone that we thought were relevant came on board, be it some said EFCC, and I saw some names being mentioned. Everyone, we stretched as much as possible to ensure that the relevant persons and relevant agencies were brought to the table. So once again, I want to thank CIoD for giving us this platform again, and we hope and pray that the collaboration that has existed or that is still in existence between FRC and CIoD will definitely continue. So thank you all. God bless.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osawe, and thank you very much, everyone. We thank you all for coming again, and I want to wish you a very wonderful day. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.